All right, SLP212. So we are on module 15. So a couple things. So social stories, I think I've gotten a couple messages already today about social stories. So I just want to say we're going to make a social story. And it can be about anything you want. I think somebody asked, can they make a social story about getting ready? Yes. Wearing a mask, absolutely. We've been doing a bunch of those lately. Getting a haircut. So anything that we see, and this holds true not just for our clients with autism, but clients with other disabilities too, that sometimes a social story helps prep them for what they will do, what will happen. So virtually, I don't think I've said no to anybody in the last few years. No one's asked about making a social story for something not appropriate. But if you're not sure, or if it's not going to, or you're not sure if that is really what, is going to work for a social story, let me know. So somebody was asking about like putting on shoes. Usually putting on shoes is a bigger piece of the puzzle. You usually don't write a social story just about putting on shoes. Now, if somebody didn't wear shoes in public, sometimes we do write maybe a social story about wearing shoes in public. So I know we delved into all the material this week, but usually if you're looking for something very specific, make sure it's not part of like a bigger thing. Because usually the social story is kind of the whole picture, not just one simple task. Like when we've done social stories for masks, it's about keeping yourself healthy, keeping others healthy, being so you can be out in public or be around others or be in public places. So there's a bigger thing than just putting on the mask and wearing it. It's about public health. It's about safety. So it's a more of a broader subject. Although the task of wearing a mask is challenging. So for some of our clients, for sure. All right. So our read and review. Oh, I hope I didn't miss anybody else. Okay. So go to, so I do like this website about approaches. So when we look at all the different approaches, so social stories comes up on here, excuse me, hang on. And kind of, I like this, I like how it's organized. So for me, I don't know if you guys have noticed, I tend to like websites that are organized, and that might be because my husband runs a, software company, and he usually does online applications, and it's really about being neat and organized and easy to navigate. So my one big beef about the ASHA website, I do feel like sometimes it's difficult to navigate through their system. So this is great. So if you can look at like social communication programs, looking at, who are they used for? Why should you implement it? That kind of thing. And looking at what are target areas. So a lot of times when we're looking at some of the programs, nonverbal communication, paralinguistic skills, conversational skills, assertive behavior. So definitely we work on those in a variety of manners with a variety of disabilities. And then so social stories. And what's nice is I like how concise the information is. And Carol Gray is kind of the person who kind of developed this. I think when I kind of thought of a social story before I learned the term, I kind of thought more of kind of a expected checklist, like what's going to happen when we go to the restaurant, what's going to happen when we go to the dentist, that kind of thing. So to me, it's kind of like a preparation, or trying to, what I kind of term in language, kind of a language perspective, is we're building a schema for them, or they maybe haven't experienced or don't want to experience it, but we want to kind of give them the mindset of what happens when you're doing this task. So going to the dentist. What can I expect going to the dentist? Obviously, it's not always horrible. Hopefully, when sometimes it can be, but most of the time, it's to get clean, check and make sure, your teeth are good. So kind of giving them that prep of what to expect when they have an event, an outing, or complete a task. So really, ideally, the whole term social story was really developed for people with autism, but I really think that any person who's having social difficulties, any person who's having a variety of challenges, who even anxiety, when I look at the anxiety piece, so I've used it with clients who've had various levels of anxiety. And even for us, if I think about myself doing a new situation, what information can I look up so I know what to expect? So, or can I talk to somebody who has done this? What happens? What are some of the steps that you have to go through? So for instance, it's so funny. I had a friend, so I have 4 children. Granted, 2 of my children are with the help of a great fertility doctor. And in talking to a friend, so it was so funny because I had a SLP friend who recommended the fertility doctor where I went, and she sent me a social story and what to expect, going to the fertility doctor is kind of a funny thing. So, but honestly, it helped me to be ready for the questions, be ready for what I might need to do. What are some of the options that happen? So she was really helpful in facilitating that for me. And it was kind of funny because her and I often would share social stories. So she kind of did that as a funny gift. But, if you're having anxiety about a situation, and this, like I said, a variety of clients, or even sometimes our clients with traumatic brain injury, or who've had some, lapses with memory. And somebody was asking about dementia. I think it's more about reminders instead of so much what to expect, like where are you going? Why are you going? What are we going to do? Why do we do that? So I can't say I've done social stories for somebody with dementia. I've done more like checklists, like, we're going here and why, so they can refer to it to help remind them. But that's various levels of dementia. So, and who can implement it? So really, truly, obviously us as therapists, we're going to demonstrate, model it, maybe introduce it. But what I want to say is really anybody can do a social story with any person who's having difficulties with a particular task. So sometimes I feel like therapists, we kind of have this claim of ownership of things, but can an occupational therapist do a social story? Sure. In fact, I've helped our physical therapist write a couple for some of her clients about, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And this is what they should do. So it's helpful for a variety of disciplines and for a variety of disabilities. Like I said, we kind of think social stories, we kind of automatically go to autism because that was the first intent of this, but it really is versatile. And I think anxiety is another area, and various disabilities have various levels of anxiety. Somebody with a cognitive impairment, we're trying to understand maybe purpose or reasoning. So that's kind of helpful for those clients with some cognitive impairments. So really, truly, so what I want to say is it's usually written in a book. So I think when we're usually talking about social stories, we're talking about a lot of picture-based things, but you can write a social story in words. So I worked with a particular middle school age client a while ago at a private clinic, and he was literate. I mean, he had a lot of he had multiple disabilities, but he was very literate, not necessarily at grade level, but he could read. So it was funny because I would write these social stories and then I shared it with the therapist at his school. And, and these were things his mom would keep in the car for him to review. And so I wrote them just kind of in, he'd call them in poem format. They weren't really a poem, but it was kind of like, it kind of followed a pattern. It was usually like 8 to 10 sentences about, this is what we're doing. This is what's expected. here are ways I can respond or things I can do. And then it was kind of like, then I called it a reminder sentence, you know, when walking through the store, I need to stay with my mom. I will stay with my mom. You have to write it positive. So a lot of times social stories, we're not writing what you're not going to do. We're not writing what's not going to happen. We're going to write what will happen, what you will do. So we write them in the positive framework. And so this particular young man really liked his social stories. He was like, okay, which one are we writing this week? And he did like to review them. And his mom would always comment. And then when I shared with his therapist at school, she was like, oh, you're right. He's literate. He doesn't need picture-based things. So a lot of times we use social stories to help some of our more, nonverbal clients with autism, maybe someone who isn't literate. But if they're literate, you can write one out too. So pictures are helpful. So even if they are literate, usually putting a couple pictures. So a lot of times when I've done one, I've tried to use the picture of the actual client. That's not always possible. Or for instance, I have a social story for a fire drill. Obviously I don't have each client, but I have it handy because I don't know how many times it's happened. I've needed one quickly. So I kind of have a generic one, and it's got some words and pictures. So it's kind of a variety between literate and picture-based. So I kind of like somewhere in the middle. I usually like some kind of visual on a social story to help remind somebody depending on their level of impairment. But it's really great. I think it's nice if, let's say you do it in therapy, they use that same thing at school, at home, in different environments when they're with different people. And for instance, a lot of times when I do one even clinic or school-based, a lot of times trying to share that and be consistent with their HAB provider or their person who does respite, because it's usually helping prepare them for something. So lots of social stories about going to bed, getting ready, eating breakfast, getting on the bus. So definitely I do one. So for instance, a social story, and I don't want everyone to always think that it's low abilities, or not low abilities, but someone with kind of limited abilities. A lot of times it can be for someone pretty high functioning. So I've written a social story for just your average learning disabled kids, kind of more geared towards, your average middle school child. Okay, what happens when I'm at the high school? Because our high school is very different than our K-8 schools. So I try to give them kind of a prep, and I share it with some of the SPED teachers so they can kind of have a framework about what does it look like? Where do I go to get help? What's the room number? So they already kind of have, and I use actual pictures, and I like it because it helps prep them. So what do I expect? What's going to happen? Oh, here's the room number. Okay, I know I can go here for the academic center. So really fun. So I like that website. Great information on approaches. A lot of it's geared. It's not just geared towards people with autism. It's kind of, this is the apps. There is a social story app. Hold on. No, that's not the one I wanted. Oh, social thinking. So the only other thing I want to say about social thinking is, oh, come on. There we go. So social thinking is more of a, it's more of a curriculum, if I dare want to use that word. I don't like using that word, but social thinking, the website, and it's Dr. Michelle Garcia Winner. And she, I think what I would say, she's somewhere in the melting pot of cognitive behavioral therapy and speech therapy. So I think what I like about social thinking, it's kind of a mesh between the two. So she uses a lot of cognitive behavioral approaches, as well as things that we do from a speech perspective. And so there's some great curriculums, and it's really talking about, thinking. How are we going to use our minds to be social? And I really like the zones of regulation. And I want to say kind of that's one that OT usually owns. That's kind of their things, self-regulation, but really a lot of social skills, a lot of social interaction has to do with them being able to regulate themselves. So they are able to talk to others, interact with others, be in the right frame of mind. I use zones of regulation. I know my poor intern is probably sick in hearing of it. And I talk about the different zones, being ready to learn. When you're in a zone, what are some strategies that help you get back? We call it back to green. So the green zone's kind of, you're happy, you're content, you're focused, you're ready to learn. So at school, I really focus on the ready to learn. At home or clinic-based, you're happy, you're feeling good. You're not too high, feeling real happy, or low, feeling tired, bored. So we talk about the 4 different zones and and I do a lot of vocabulary and emotional things related to that, because part of the zones and part of our social interaction is understanding feelings. So a lot of what I think social thinking focuses on is, what is my body doing? How am I feeling? What are things I want to do to express myself in social situations? So I really like with social thinking, I love the zones of regulation. I think my whole school really uses that across the board. OT is probably happy. She does it too, but I do take a big role in supporting that. So that's nice that we do that across 2 disciplines. We do a lot with emotion words, with how we're feeling, and then how to express those appropriately. So how am I feeling? If I'm angry, if I'm happy, when is the appropriate time and place to express those? So I do like zones of regulation. Social thinking has great social detective, and they've been adding some new things to it. So I think I probably have one of the first editions. So it's probably time that I, buy the updated one. But if you look at some of their products, the zones of regulation, Superflex, that program, here it is, Superflex curriculum package. That's really kind of like what I call superhero comic strip type thing that the kids will actually sit and listen to. So definitely, I've used Superflex, zones, your social detective, definitely think social. So thinking about you, thinking about me. So kind of having that perspective. Okay, I'm doing something. What are other people's thoughts? And do I have weird thoughts, or are my thoughts okay? So, and then we talk about kind of the levels. Are you at a 1 or 5? So 1 is like your average response, to 5 being, a different response than what the usual is. So we talk about kind of those levels. So I like social thinking, lots of social programs. I would say evidence-based practice in all areas social, as well as some of that self-regulation piece. So definitely what I like about this site is there are usually some free online trainings. There are, decent prices on products you might want to buy. And definitely they kind of zero in on the different ages. So there's different ages for this level. And I really like that. So I think, and it's kind of nice too, when we're talking about social thinking, to me, I feel it's kind of more of a curriculum, and it's kind of a step-by-step. And you can use it not just with autism. ADHD is another big disorder I use social thinking with. So ADHD, wide variety of anxiety disorders, selective mutism, autism. I'm trying to think of some others. Some of our clients who might have some emotional disabilities. So I like it, and I think zones of regulation, almost every client benefits from it on some level. And just recognizing, how am I feeling? What is my body doing? How am I responding? So I really like that. Those are the 2 websites I really like. There are some other information on the ASHA. There's apps, and there is an example of a social story. And I need to I want to load another one. Here's some goals. So when we're looking at pragmatic language goals, what are some things we might do? So here's just some of your average goals that we work on when we're working on pragmatic language. So given a social conversation, the client will ask one question of the clinician about her sharing. So definitely looking at, can they ask questions to others? Can they ask inquisitive questions? Not just questions. So sometimes our clients with autism will ask something like, what do you know about dinosaurs? And then they'll go on their tirade of dinosaurs. No, ask a genuine question about me. You know, walk in my, well, first of all, you walk in my classroom right now, it's a mess. But yeah, I don't have dinosaurs all around the classroom. So that might not be a good question to ask me. What do you see? You see speech materials. Okay. What could you ask this person? So kind of teaching them also how to be a social detective. What would be a good question to ask, you know, the speech therapist, the PE teacher? Let's just look at things we know about them. And then we also do that with friends. So trying to help them pick out things with classmates that they could ask their peers about. Or when we're looking client-based, I love doing some small groups, especially the adolescents, really working on these conversational skills. How do you have a give and take, a back and forth? How do you have those conversational turns? And then, you know, how are you staying on topic? So a lot of times it's staying on topic, making comments. I've done another one where we talk about, are they sharing relevant or irrelevant information? So a lot of times I don't ever want to tell somebody their information they want to share is not important. I don't, trying to be, you know, as I've expanded my therapy understanding is, I don't want to label, like, I don't like to label emotions good or bad. We have all levels of emotions. It's how we respond with those emotions is what's important. So things like when they want to go on their tangents about topics that most of us maybe don't care to listen to, it is important to them. So we don't want to, you know, downplay importance, but just talk to them about, hey, you know, is that really relevant to our conversation right now? Like this one kid was talking about dinosaurs. You can tell I saw him today. And there are some other kids that also want to talk about dinosaurs, but we were trying to talk about an article about asteroids, which wasn't hard for him to then come up with how that relates to the dinosaurs. But I just kept talking to him. I'm like, okay, talking about, you know, the brontosaurus and whatever, is that really relevant to our discussion about, you know, the meteors and the asteroids, and, you know, just trying to talk about relevant versus irrelevant versus important or unimportant information. So I've been trying to change that, because I think too, some of our clients who have some social challenges, they get the message that what they have to say is not important. It's just a lot of times they don't bring it up at the time that's appropriate, or, hey, we can have a conversation about that later, but not now. Like now we need to focus on this. So kind of working on strategies about when it's okay to talk about your preferred topics. And yeah, so the topic maintenance and the balance. So definitely we try to work on that. So these are some just good examples of what might you see as an SLPA, and you have to work on some social skills. So I just want to review, hang on, the assignments. Oh, here's some vocabulary. So be sure you have good understanding of these. Parallel play, you're going to hear a lot. Monotone, we're usually talking in reference to vocal levels. But social language and social rules. So kind of be familiar with that. Salutations, when we use that word, greetings. But parallel play. So parallel play is important. That's important precursor skill. So parallel play, be sure you're clear on what that is. So our kids are out playing. Can somebody play next to a child and do what they're doing? So let's say there's two kids playing in the sandbox and they're both digging. They're both doing an appropriate action. They might not be interacting, but they're both at the sandbox and they're both like digging. We don't have one person at the sandbox and he's just dumping all the sand out of the, you know, sometimes one kid I had that, he just would go to the sandbox and just do everything he could to dump all of it out. not really appropriate play, and when nobody else was doing that. So really working on, is the client able to play next to a peer and do kind of the same activity? So not doing something different, or I don't want to say makes them stand out, but odd. So something that's not really play for the action. So for instance, if somebody's playing with trucks and our client is next to them, are they playing with trucks appropriately, or are they just stacking this trucks, lining them up, and then getting upset if somebody comes and takes one? So, you know, looking at how they're playing. So parallel play is really looking, are they playing like it's another same age peer would? We're not worried too much about that interaction piece of play, but you have to be able to play next to somebody and do the same thing before you can then interact with them. So be sure you're clear on parallel play, salutations, you know, monotone. Mutual gaze is also sometimes joint attention. So there's a template. So you don't have to use the template. Somebody asked, like, you can use the template link, but somebody was like, can I just use a slide presentation? Yes. Can you just use a PowerPoint? Sure. So you can use a different template. I just provided one to kind of help you. So there's that. And then a quiz. So lots of vocab on the quiz. So please be familiar with the vocabulary, and then a read and review summary. So, excuse me, let me make sure, sorry, wrong module. Yeah, read and review summary. So a social story, a quiz, and then a read and review summary, and then a grade check. So hopefully you won't have too many issues. Then next week's the final. So we're not really having office hours next week. We'll get the final up and ready. So I'm working hard to get your guys' grades updated and current before Saturday, so you know where you're going, kind of going into finals week. Any other questions? Hold on, I can't see the chat, so hold on. I can never see the chat when I'm screen sharing. Okay, no. All right then, well, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time, and hopefully everybody had a good week Thanksgiving.
I have a quick question, sorry.
No,
Are
go
we
ahead.
submitting the PowerPoint and doing a video as well for that assignment?
Oh, good question. Okay, hold on. What did I say? You know, we've changed sometimes. Oh gosh, I cannot minimize. Okay, hold on one second.
Okay, sorry, I should ask.
No, that's okay. I always forget that when I'm on here. But yeah, I probably should clarify. I can't remember. Yes, I'm sorry. So you do the social story and then post the video. So like you get 10 points for the social story and then 10 points for the video. Okay, you don't have to like read through it or anything. It's just how will you use it. So whatever your social story was about, make sure you're explaining how you might use that with a client in a session. So really kind of understanding your justification for making the social story. So for instance, I wrote a weird one not too long ago about this kid putting his iPad away in his backpack, and it was becoming a huge problem. Kind of a lame reason to make one, but just explaining, why did I make it? Why was it a problem? How come we thought we maybe needed that as an intervention? So I just remember explaining that to my principal in my post-op. She was like, that was kind of weird. What was that about? So really just the video has to be real short. You don't have to go through every single thing. And then somebody asked me about the length of the social story. Really, it's hard because they do vary. What I'm looking for is these, like at least, 5 or 6 things. And a lot of times they're longer. Usually you can make them longer, but you don't want to be too long either. So, like I said, 5 or 6 slides is kind of the ballpark. It can be less if it completes a complete task or story, or it could be longer, but I don't need 30, 40 slides. I'm looking for, 5 to 10, I think, is probably maybe a good ballpark. If you have 12, that's okay. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
All righty. Well, you guys have a good night. And I always appreciate you guys joining me. You guys have been a good group this year. Somebody else, one another, adjunct was like, no one's coming. I'm like, well, I don't have that problem. I always have at least a few people coming. So I appreciate it. And you guys really have a good night.